Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a trailer reaction and breakdown to the second trailer for Morbius. Now Morbius is the latest superhero entry within Sony's Spider-Verse, which centres around many of Spider-Man's iconic famous villains. Now already we've had two movies around Venom. The first one back in 2018 was a huge box office hit, grossing over $850 million worldwide. We recently had its sequel, Venom Let There Be Carnage, released in 2021 as well. Kraven the Hunter, starring Aaron Taylor Johnson in the lead, is also in development, and they also recently announced a Madam Web standalone movie with Dakota Johnson in the lead role. Now in terms of Morbius, we've had several delays of the project due to COVID etc, but it's now been confirmed for release on April 1st 2022, and the story itself centres around Dr. Michael Morbous looking for a cure for a terminal blood disease. He eventually experiments on himself, which gives him superpowers, but also curses him with the bloodlust of a vampire. And you can check out my review of the first trailer of the movie, and I'll leave some links in the description. Well, overall, I thought it was very much of a decent project. There's a lot of 90s superhero action vibes around it, and it will be interesting to see how much they develop the story in terms of Morbius being much more of an anti-hero in many sense, much more of a sympathetic character. And if we do eventually get some connection towards Tom Holland's Spider-Man or any other version of Spider-Man within the Sony universe, how exactly will they present the interaction between both the likes of Morbius and Spider-Man? So there's a bit of interest surrounding this project in terms of its upcoming release. So we're just going to take a look now at the second trailer overall and just go through what I believe are the most standout elements. We'll play this through. I'll have to mute the sound again to make sure, or to try and avoid any copyright issues, but hopefully I'll be as concise as I can within this breakdown. So let's take a look now at the second trailer. So we have a couple of shots here on the boat, and we see here all the soldiers are coming under the interior of the boat here, and they're hunting down Morbius, it seems like here. So very much of a typical horror-like scene. It reminds me a bit of the opening sequence, if you remember, of Incredible Hulk, where there was a similar setup where we had soldiers hunting down Morbius, or in this case Incredible Hulk, and then we saw the emergence of him later on. So that's what it reminded me of similarly when looking at this sequence. And then we see the shot here of Morbius, and I think it's a very good rendition of the character. Looks very stylish, looks very good. They haven't overdone it in terms of the prosthetics, but no, it looks very good in terms of visualization of Michael Morbous. Sony, Columbia, the logo, Marvel, of course. And then again, we get some shots here of this will be Morbius hunting down the cure, where he's visiting various locations. Now, I believe they've changed the iteration a bit from the original source material, because Morbius is very much of this wealthy, very renowned doctor, a bit like Doctor Strange. And that's how he's able to afford all of these operations into these various locations to hunt for this cure. And then we go back to the references that I made before about making him far more sympathetic. So we saw this in the first trailer where he's talking to young children in hospital, and I believe that this character here, she's also suffering from a similar blood disease as what Morbius is suffering from, and then that's when he's going to try and find the disease. And then we go into these clips here where he's again searching through the caves or the caverns to find this disease, and this is where he comes across the various vampire bats. So very similar Batman Begins vibes that we see when the bats surrounding him on this scene here, but it's very visually good overall. So then we get this next shot here where we see Morbius with a hoodie on walking out within the streets. So I assume this will probably be in the earlier stages of the movie where he's first discovered all of his powers and he's just trying to get a grip on them, and he has to obviously walk out within the streets, and he's just trying to keep himself hidden. Very good shot here of him using his eyesight, it seems. If you remember from the first trailer, we had a couple of sequences where Morbius seems to have this almost like this altered vision, like this, not necessarily a spider sense, but also like a super sense in terms of his vision, where we can see certain energies around the buildings. That's what we saw within the first trailer. We get a cool looking shot here of where we see the bus morphing. Now I don't believe the bus is morphing. I think this is just again Morbius's super sight, able to see the aura and the energy around him. This could be a case if there are several other demons within the city and Morbius able to sense them out, maybe other vampire characters as well. We'll see how they push this idea. But they're trying to very much expand on the concept in terms of Morbius' superpowers and just make him more than just somebody who is hunting down people's blood in order to survive. So we have another shot here where he's in some sort of warehouse facility or maybe hospital facility, and you've got, I believe, the various blood packs on the wall here So again, this is him trying to satiate his bloodlust. So this is the scene that I mentioned before that we saw within the first trailer of where we see these kind of blue silver spirits inhabiting the city. Now, this could be the climatic act of the film where some sort of being is trying to exhibit some sort of major superpower and it's taken over the city. You have this cool shot here of him just running across the city. So again, they're very much going to emphasize on his super speed and his reflexes and agility. We're going to see lots of scenes of him jumping over buildings and through walls and jumping in mid-air. Lots of slow motion shots guaranteed, I'm sure. So we get this shot here where we see various victims, and you can tell by the blood on here that they've had their blood exhibited from them. Now, could this be Morbius? Could this be another villain? We're not sure, because as I mentioned before, they very much wanted to paint Morbius here as very much of an anti-hero or more sympathetic villain. We may not have scenes of Morbius actually taking down police force as what we see on here. Some of them are injured, so maybe some of them are not all dead, or maybe they're unconscious. Again, that would be another way to play it if you wanted to have sequences where Morbius is extracting blood from certain people, but he only extracts enough to incapacitate him. But as you can see on here, this police officer is clearly dead, and it certainly seems that this other police officer is dead. So this one has seemingly survived, it looks like. Maybe he's died and they're trying to take blood samples as well. But it'll be very interesting to see, again, how intense they go in terms of the bloodlust and Morbius attacking other victims. So just more shots here of Morbius. Here he's experimenting here. So again, we're not sure whether this takes place at the beginning or the middle of the movie. Of course, Morbius is going to try and cure himself of this disease. So again, we're going to play very much on the narrative of torment and pain that we see within the Morbius character in order to try and cure himself from this disease. So this is a character who I believe will be Morbius's mentor throughout the film, and this is an actor called Gerard Harris who will be playing the role. So again, this is very typical. Whenever you have a superhero or an anti-hero, he needs that mentor character to bounce off, to show him the ropes, to help him cope with his overall disease. So again, very typical role that we see throughout this film. So again, this sequence here where you see Morbius manifesting himself in much more of a spirit-like form as he's jumping up and down the buildings. So again, I credit them for trying to find more inventive ways to showcase his powers. But again, very decent effects. You can't really complain too much. I think they look convincing enough. Now, this is, of course, will be probably one of the biggest highlights within this trailer, and that is, of course, the emergence of Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes, as we all know, the Vulture, who was the villain from Spider-Man Homecoming, and of course, we already knew that he was appearing within this film. We saw that within the first trailer. How much involved would he be in terms of this overall story? Now, when we see from this trailer, it very much indicates that he'll be giving Morbius some sort of pep talk in terms of embracing the villainous side of his personality. So I'm sure we'll get some sort of quotes or references to the events within Spider-Man Homecoming, and indeed some allusions perhaps in terms of Spider-Man, the Tom Holland version. Now, if you've watched No Way Home, you'll know very much so that the way that film ended, it won't be quite as simple as just name dropping Tom Holland's Spider-Man, because of all of the multiversal effects and ramifications that we saw within Spider-Man No Way Home. So it will be interesting to see how exactly they do name drop, because I'm sure they will do. No doubt about it, they want to feed off the huge success of Spider-Man No Way Home. As I mentioned before, Sony is very much intent on building this whole Sony Spider-Man verse around his villains. It doesn't make sense to get an actor of Michael Keaton's stature just for one or two scenes, so I'm pretty much sure he'll have some sort of substantial role within this film. Again, very interesting the fact that Michael Keaton is involved in both Marvel and DC projects as well. As we all know, he's appearing in the Batgirl movie and also The Flash. So just a very funny scenario that we're seeing alongside here. But I'm sure Michael Keaton, as usual, will bring very much of an imposing performance. He was very good in the villainous role as Adrian Toomes, and I'm expecting to continue that standard throughout this film as well. I think this is probably a flashback sequence where we see, assumingly, a younger Morbius on the left. That probably is Morbius in his younger days here, again suffering from his blood disease. So this is obviously an ailment that he's had throughout his life, and I believe the person on the right could be the character played by Matt Smith, who we all know is the main villain throughout this film. So yeah, we see here some shots here. So this could be typical storyline where somebody's getting picked on and bullied. This could be the Matt Smith character, because they're very much, I believe, going to make some sort of personal connection between Morbius and Matt Smith's character throughout this film. If you know from the background synopsis of this film, Matt Smith's character also suffers from the same blood disease that Michael Morbous does. So they're going to look for some sort of emotional juxtaposition between the two characters, I'm sure. And these are the flashbacks that they're hoping to add more weight to that overall relationship between the two characters. So Matt Smith's character here, so he will be playing a character named Loxias Crown. Now, I'm not familiar with this character. I'm not sure whether he's part of the source material or whether he's the original character that they've created. But as I mentioned before, he suffers from the same blood disease that Morbius does. I'm sure we'll get some sort of narrative where he discovers that Morbius does have the abilities and he'll look to harness his powers from his own devices. Now, to be honest, this is probably a bit of a cringe-worthy delivery from Matt Smith. As we all know, he's a very much of a exaggerated, extroverted performer, especially if you watch him from the Doctor Who show when he was performing within that show. But his delivery just felt a bit off. It just felt a bit hammy, a bit too comical. And yeah, it was a bit laughable when watching this scene overall. And then again, we get some more visual shots here of Morbius flying through the city. Much more shots here of distorting realities and everything as he's changing his shapeshifters. More shots of bats on here. So good visual shots on here. Again, very reminiscent of Batman. Again, just this whole sequence here, just so reminiscent of Batman Begins, of the bats flying through the city, just so reminiscent of the climactic act from Batman Begins. And then this other shot here where he's surrounding by the bats, again very similar to when we saw that sequence from Bruce Wayne being surrounded by bats in the early parts of Batman Begins as well. So again, it looks very good visually. You can't complain too much in terms of the special effects on here, the shot. And then that's where we come to the end of the trailer. So in terms of the second trailer, it probably was on par with the first trailer. It didn't leave me any more or less convinced overall. I still can't see any real merit in a standalone Morbius story, but then again, I feel that way about all of the upcoming projects around Sony in terms of the Craven movie and also Madam Web. It will be interesting to see if Morbius is indeed a box office success, whether we will see an eventual sequel or some introduction of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Again, without spoiling it too much, if you haven't seen No Way Home, it's going to be very difficult to integrate him with these other characters because of the events that played out throughout this film overall. But in terms of this second trailer, decent, not bad. Again, nothing stand out or special. And we'll see what happens when the film releases on April the 1st. They moved it back a bit. Again, partly due to COVID, but also I think to try and maybe reshoot some sort of scenes that will show some sort of connection between No Way Home as well. That was very deliberate on Sony's part. And it'll be very interesting to see the end credits sequences that we get at the end of this film, whether they will hint to Craven Hunter, Madam Web, or maybe even several other Spider-Man villains in the pipeline. If you remember from the first trailer, there was a newspaper clipping that made reference to the Rhino and the Black Cat as well. So I'm sure there'll be some sort of expansion into the further Sony universe surrounding Spider-Man's villains. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the reaction and breakdown of the second trailer for Morbius. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you excited for this movie, or do you think it's a bit of a waste and we should really be concentrating far more on trying to integrate Spider-Man far more into this universe and painting these characters far more as villains rather than sympathetic anti-heroes? How do you think the Sony Spider-Verse will play out and succeed in the future? Let me know what you think also in the comments. And as usual, when the film does release on April the 1st, I will provide both non-spoiler and spoiler reviews and also give some commentary regarding the box office opening weekends. So those are my overall thoughts on Morbius on the second trailer. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.